Our complete library of episodes is available for free at spotlightonpodcast.com/episodes. There you'll find all of our conversations stretching back to our launch in February of 2020. Check it out. Hello and welcome to Spotlight On, the podcast featuring musicians, writers, innovators, and ideas shaping music, arts, entertainment, and culture. I'm your host, Lawrence Purrier. Today, the spotlight shines on pianist and composer Marina Albero. From Barcelona's vibrant music scene to the heart of New Orleans, Marina keeps finding new ways to push musical boundaries. Her latest album, A Nomad of Sound, brings together jazz, classical, and world music traditions in a blend all her own. Marina has journeyed across continents and cultures, from her early years studying classical piano in Cuba to recent acclaim in Seattle, where she's twice been named Musician of the Year. Now, she's taken her keyboards to New Orleans, collaborating with some of the city's finest players and even recording on Ellis Marsalis' personal piano. She's here to share stories from her musical travels and give us a glimpse into her adventurous new album, where traditional jazz meets Spanish flamenco, Cuban rhythms, and even some fiery guitar solos. And now, Marina Albero. I've spent a bunch of time listening to the new record. It's really wonderful. But before we get there, I wonder if we could sort of set the table a little bit for people who will listen to this. I'm so intrigued by your early life as a musician and your family dynamic that you came up in of musicians. And I was hoping maybe we could start by you telling me a little bit about that.
Yeah, of course. I like to say that the legend says that I was on stage with my mom and my dad, and they used to have several instruments that they wouldn't even play. And they said that one day I just stood up and started playing the xylophone on stage. And I was playing already, the tunes. Like I already knew the tunes that they were playing over and over. And they said, okay, we're going to remember. And also at that time, I always loved dancing. So I kind of alternated dancing some traditional, Spanish folk music and playing. So I was dreaming of being a dancer, but apparently music was so easy to me that they were like, no, stay and play everything.
Was being a musician just always what you were going to do, or was there ever an alternative path?
That's a great question. I didn't feel like I had a choice. And at some point when I was young in my life, I had a big existential crisis. I was like, oh my gosh, what do I want to do? Because I love psychology, pedagogy, writing. I used to write a lot.
Yeah.
What really made me decide that's what I wanted to do was when I went to Cuba. And that's when I'm 15 years old only until I turn 18. And there is what I really am on my own and making connections on my own. So that's when I realized that music was a really beautiful place for me to grow, connect, and express myself. So after I came back from Cuba, 18 years old, I didn't go back to my mom and my dad. I already started living by myself, teaching. I still work with them. I started playing my own music as well. So I would say when I was 18 years old, that was a decision that I made very consciously. But when I was 12, 13, I was a little bit like, okay, that's what I'm doing and I have talent for that. But do I have talent for anything else? So I had this little moment when I was very, very young. But yeah, definitely after I came back from Cuba, that was a decision made. Totally.
What led you to Cuba?
That's funny. I came to Seattle when I was 12 with my mom and my dad to rehearse for a theater play that we were going to perform at the Olympic Games, what they call the Cultural Olympics. And it was with one reel and a Japanese theater company. And I loved it so much here. And I had someone that said, if you want to stay, you can stay here. You'll go to Roosevelt. They even took me to Roosevelt one day, high school. I was begging to my mom and my dad, I want to go to Seattle. I want to live in Seattle. It looks so cool. And they were like, it's a little bit far away. It's super far away. We don't speak the language. But look, your brother just went to Cuba last September. Why don't you go and visit and see if you like it? Because at least you would have somebody there and they speak the same language and we have a couple of friends you could stay with. And that was the change of path. But as you can see, I'm very stubborn. So I did to Cuba because my brother was there. I liked it when I went for a week. I was like, wow, this is music everywhere. People are really nice. I can dance every night. So it worked for me. And I studied piano there, classical piano. But the idea of Seattle never abandoned me. I mean, I was always thinking one day I'll live in Seattle. So in a way, I did both. But my first idea was coming to Seattle and kind of leaving that family that I had that was beautiful, but also the fact that I was working and living with them, I kind of needed a break, and they saw it. They realized, like, wow, Marina needs some time on her own. So they ended up sending me to Cuba. I had the best of times. And later on, 20 years later, I moved to Seattle.
When you came to Seattle as a younger girl, did you speak English?
No, not really. But I've been always very good at languages. And again, I love reading and writing. So I started, getting an idea. I actually only took a few lessons of English later when I was like 14. So I always say that I learned by ear pretty much, and then start working in Europe with the early music people. English was the language because there were so many nationalities on the ensembles. So I kind of just started picking it up. And then when I came to Seattle, I remember signing up for an English class at the Bellevue College. But right the first week, I got a job at the Seattle Waldorf School as an accompanist playing piano. So I could never attend. So I like to say that I paid for an English course, but I didn't have the chance to attend.
When you were in Cuba, you mentioned a moment ago about how there's music everywhere, and that was definitely my experience. I only spent about a week there, but of the handful of things that really struck me about the island, the culture around music and how really, music, at least in my experience, it started in the evening and went all night. It's so beautiful that way. But I'm curious, while you were there, what did your studies look like? What traditions were you immersed in?
I was basically immersed in my classical studies because that's what I was doing in Spain. So I was taking counterpoint and harmony lessons and classical percussion and classical piano mostly. All the traditional folk music and Afro-Cuban music that I learned was pretty much hanging out with my friends, going dancing and jamming with them, and they would tell me something. I also transcribed a whole album of Cuban music from the 90s on piano because I didn't want to get there without knowing, because I know they joke a lot about, people from other places trying to play Cuban music. So I went there kind of ready to show them that I got it. And I remember my brother having a percussion class when I just got there, and I went visit him, and the teacher said, Marina, where do you think that the clave goes? And he started playing guaguancó, and I just, played whatever I felt. It was cool. And he said, see, to my brother, see, she's got it. So to me, it was kind of natural. Music has been always quite natural. And of course, I feel challenged by other musical traditions the first time I get immersed into them. But actually, it's just paying attention, being respectful and listening, and go for it, do it where you think that it's right. And this intuition still works because it happens a little bit similar with Indian classical music, which I've never had taken a lesson, but I've been playing with the master violin player Ganesh Rajagopalan, who just this past year, he won a Grammy with John McLaughlin, Shakti 50. So, he's a very well-known and very respected classical musician in India. And I was transcribing his music to put it in a jazz quartet because he asked me to. We had many rehearsals, and I would say, hey, something I need to know. Do you want to explain anything to me about the music and the ins and outs? And he would look at me and say, keep listening, you're doing great. And I was like, wow, here we go again. Mm-hmm. And it's flattering because I'm like, okay, apparently I get it and they like my flavor because it's different. So far, so good. I'm blessed like that. I get this language, this channeling that comes all the way from my great grandma, and it's been passed on to my kids as well. So I understand that it is a language, and that, some people were just vessels for that. We understand. It's like a mother tongue.
I don't want to over intellectualize it, but do you have a theory of that? Do you feel like maybe it's something, is it genetic? Is it cultural? Is it the environment you grew up in? That's not a common ability for people to tap into. I'd imagine it can be cultivated, but I'm curious what your theory of it is.
Well, I've seen all cases around me and professional musicians that never had any musical history in their families. And they sat on the piano when they were 7 and they were already, kind of knew what was going on. So I just think it's some sort of a language. It's like other people have this brain for math or for science, they just see it. So I think we do come with certain information. I do believe that each person, each child comes with a talent. And when we are little and we really love doing something and people say, oh, you're good at it, that means that you really have the talent. Because kids, when something doesn't really work that naturally, they usually go into another thing. And I think that's where the talent resides. And I think we all have some sort of talent. It could be cooking, it could be speaking, it could be being a good listener for a therapist, right? So it's, if you're lucky, and of course, sometimes depending on the environment, that talent is like spotted and supported. But even when it's really there, I've seen people with no support and their family saying, no, you're not going to be a musician. This is not a business. This is not a real job. And they end up being successful musicians, right? So to some people, the fact that somebody don't support you or anybody supports you, it's actually a motivation. Sometimes having people that support you is a motivation. But ultimately, if you have a call and you follow that call, I think it's going to be successful.
Away from the noise of the day, close by to the sound of the trees, there is a sweet place, calm and quiet, that we build for love and peace. If only I could now take you home to be with you alone and begin again.
In your time here in Seattle, it feels like you've built and have been so much a part of a community. I see your name all the time in other people's ensembles and, you bringing people into your various different projects, teaching at Cornish, the awards through Earshot and other things. Beyond that initial impulse to come here as a young person, what do you think has made this city so fertile and productive for you?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a mystery to me too, because, me, myself, I don't see my music or myself so great. I have a lot of flaws. I have a lot to work on. I am like, music is always the head of what I am as a musician. And so it's hard for me sometimes accepting that. It all started a lot because Hans Steiger trusted me as a musician, because I got here not feeling that secure about my playing or my music at all. And I was at Zinzani, Teatro Zinzani, that was my first job, because these are the same people, the same founders that it's founded One Reel. So they knew me since I was 12. And they're like, oh, you want to come to Seattle? We're going to support you. We're going to give you your first job. It was beautiful. And Hans Steiger was and still is the band director there. I was messing up a lot, I think. And he would look at me and say, keep doing what you do. You have a lot of music within you. I just want you to feel comfortable and go for it. And he would give me another solo and he would give me another classical piece to work on for the show. And I think that kind of support was key for me in Seattle to believe that I was worth something, that I was worthy of being part of that community. And everybody I would meet through Hans, or they would say, oh, what do you do in Seattle? I'm a musician. I work with Hans Steiger. I would earn respect instantly. So I do like Hans. I call him as my mentor, although he gets a little mad. He's like, I'm not that old. I'm like, I don't know. You're my mentor in town. He gave me a lot of credibility, both for myself and from others. I felt like, okay, yes, I am a musician in Seattle.
Wow.
And also he said things to me because I was very insecure about jazz and playing jazz. I've never really had, go so much into the jazz language. I did take like 3 or 4 years of piano jazz to understand the chords and being able to compose and name what I was composing. But I didn't devote my life to jazz language. And so as soon as they started including me in the jazz scene, I was a little bit like self-conscious about it. And Hans would say to me, Marina, don't try to play bebop the way the language of bebop is. We like your freshness. We like your take on it. We need that. We are craving some other improvisational language, and you have it. So he kind of encouraged me on being myself and not trying too hard to fit or change because of the dogma or the history. Although, listen to lots of jazz and I transcribe, but I also transcribe Indian music and Afghanistan music and Cuban music. So my musical taste, it's so broad that to me it's very hard focusing on one language and the whole, even flamenco. Everything you hear in my music is because I've been studying it for a few years. I've been playing that music with the people that are rooted and I like to say that I'm a musician, and that's why I write standards or playing flamenco or playing Afro-Cuban music. All this music just nurtured my own music. And I am very honored that they like my take on it and they include me in their ensembles. But I don't think I would ever start a flamenco band or an Afro-Cuban band or a bebop band. You know what I mean? So this is the kind of thing that saves me. Write my music naturally without forcing it.
Before we move ahead to the new album, I wanted to ask a little bit about the world where classical music and jazz meet, because I've talked to a lot of artists who have come up either through conservatory or being classically trained, and they were very actively, and I think maybe it's a generational thing, but there was a lot of active discouragement from improvising or even listening to jazz or bringing it into their musical practice. I'm curious about how your teachers and mentors early on felt about your interest in other musics, whether it's jazz or other traditions. And were you encouraged to have a holistic approach?
No. No, because the problem that classical music has is that they had to write it down. They had to leave that testimony on paper. So we don't have recordings of Chopin playing his own music. I am convinced that Chopin was a great improviser. I doubt very much that he would play the same nocturne exactly the same. Just looking at the scales up and down, the ornamentations are so much of an improvisation. I think he just wrote one version of the many. He would sit on the piano and play that melody and play that theme. But I doubt very much that he would play them always the same. But again, they didn't have records. So what they did is writing it down. And what we do is we look back and we think that this is the Bible. This is exactly what he wanted. Well, if you are speaking about the big ensemble, it's more like that. But even big band. Big band has not so much space for improvisation. Like the solos happen in certain spots, but there is arrangement from note one to the last one, right? So the same with the big orchestra. But even in the big orchestras, what we call the cadenzas, they used to be completely improvised. And who knows how many more spaces they would open for that. And Mozart, we all know all these theme and variations that we have from Beethoven, from Mozart, from all of them. These were improvisation on a theme. And that's what we do in jazz. I don't think jazz invented the improvisation. Jazz is the first improvised music we have records of. Right. And it's by its own, it's a style by its own right. And we know where it comes from. And we can see the birth of jazz because we have the recordings, the first recordings of King Oliver with Louis Armstrong on trumpet. Right. So we humans think that we know everything when we have a piece of paper that tells us something. And we don't question how many other stories were not told or what was left out of the paper. Right. So to me, I never really enjoyed the way that classical teachers, especially in Spain, would just hold on to the dogma and tell you this is how it's played and this is blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, were you there? I was very skeptical. I'm still very skeptical. But I would ask myself, how do you know? Oh, somebody told you that and somebody told them that. I don't know. I feel like improvisation was always in my expression. I always needed to improvise and compose. And for a few years, I even thought that to me, you're not a real artist if you don't create. Then you're just like, and it's okay being a purist and keeping certain music in a way, But nobody should think that that's the only truth. I think that's almost impossible. It's kind of a little bit of a fallacy. So I'm more inclined to think that musicians have been improvising always, like the whole humankind story. We've been always creating on the spot, and that's what an artist is: create something, make something your own. You can take a popular melody, but then you play it your own way. You put your own chords. You add whatever intro, whatever solos. So I believe that, but I wasn't encouraged to do that. And then classical musicians in the last maybe century already, they also started getting to improvisation. All this kind of avant-garde, the improvised music scene. There is a lot of people coming from the classical language and not from the jazz. So there is a point in the mid 20th century where both worlds are improvising in very different manners, because the classical people comes after Schoenberg and people who really dissect the whole temperate scale and started looking for other formulas of creating tension resolution. And so you get all these different textures, the avant-garde. Now we are in microtonal, right? So it's just interesting seeing how I think humans always, we have the need to take it to the next level, to like pick something and bring it to the next level.
Yeah, that's fair.
If Chopin would have taken everything before him and what his teachers told him, like, and only have done that, he would have never been Chopin and we would not be remembering him. Any musician will remember it because they took something to a new level, to a new spot. And to me, that means they were improvising a lot. They were like on the piano, finding new pathways. I'm very sure of that. That's my theory, though.
Is there a particular classical composer that you return to often, or that is for you is the one?
Yeah, Bach.
Bach, yeah.
I think Bach is the most. I also go back a lot to Debussy. These two are probably my go-to when I have, little time and I don't feel inspired. I'm sitting and playing. I would go and take a look at the preludes and fugues or the inventions or the global variations and just play for a little bit. And it's so hard to memorize. And look, it's all diatonic. It's all very, very much like a theory book, right? But also I see a big improviser there. What he can do with the same scale and just modulating to neighbor keys. He doesn't go to any faraway keys. It's almost like bebop or like the Brazilian music, all these short. It's very diatonic, but they can be improvising and telling these stories with the same notes with such a creativity. It's really astonishing to me. I think it's easier when you have all this freedom on the 21st century, all these weird chords that you can play and stuff.
Mm.
But what Bach did and how he said, that's a little bit of a Bible in music theory. It's amazing. And then another one that I love, and it's all over my compositions, it's Montpou. Frederic Montpou was a composer from Barcelona, from, I would say, the whole 20th century, because he passed away in the 80s when he was like 83. So he pretty much lived the whole 20th century. And he went to France and studied there with Fourier, with other people. So he was really in touch with the expressionism, but he also took all the Catalan melodies and other melodies from the Iberian Peninsula and put them in a very delicate and a very, I would say, intellectual, but also very sentimental way. So I love Montpou because I feel very kind of identified with him.
We'll be back with more Spotlight on and Marina Albero right after this break.
After listening to this episode, head to thetonarm.com, our new online journal covering unexpected music and culture. This week features an extended conversation with innovative percussionist Lisa Pegger. Bluegrass mandolin player Tristan Scroggins dances with architecture. Brooklyn jazz trio Works discuss their approach to improvisation. And British singer-songwriter Jono McCleary tackles grief on his album Reconcile. You'll find all this and more at The Tone Arm. And while you're there, be sure to subscribe to our email newsletter. That's thetonarm.com. The Tone Arm, putting a needle on the cultural wax.
And now, back to Spotlight on. So, tell me about New Orleans. It's like going back to the source. If Cuba's one source, New Orleans is certainly the other. Why New Orleans? Why now?
Well, New Orleans was always on my musical bucket list. I also have Brazil, a few cities in Brazil, and then I would like jumping across the ocean into West Africa and then keep going east towards India. These are places that always called me in a very powerful way because of their music and because how much of a source they are. I mean, India, they've been making music the same way for at least 5,000 years. That's something huge, you know. Africa is where all the rhythms come from. We talk about Cuba and we talk about New Orleans, even Europe. The basic rhythmic cells are from Africa, and I would like going there and learning the drumming, you know. It's kind of trying to learn the ancient words a little bit. And yeah, New Orleans, of course. When I came to the US, I always thought that at some point I wanted to go to New Orleans. I didn't know for how long, but it's not something I want to do for 2 weeks. Same with Brazil and same with India. I want to live and be with them and hang out with them to understand why it really sounds that way. So New Orleans, of course, coming to the US and wanting to learn more about jazz and rock and blues and soul, it was always a place that I knew I was going to end up going. Now, why now and not before? It's because I was raising my kids. I was a very young mom. I had my kids when I was 20 and 23. So although I was like boiling inside, I had to gather the patience that it takes being a parent and do the right things for them and give them the best education I could.
Mm.
When we moved to the US, well, they were getting a new language, a new culture, which is good for them too, because now they have two different visions, at least two of the world, and they understand that there's no place better than another one. There are good things and bad things everywhere. So I kind of wanted to focus on their education. In the US, Seattle always seemed more aligned with my sensitivity, politically, socially, the nature, education, healthcare. I came here because I thought it was going to be the best spot for my kids, you know, to get their education and raise them. So then my daughter moved to New York to attend to the new school, then pandemic. At this point today, my son and my daughter are living mostly in Spain, but we are all American citizens, which is a beautiful privilege because they can work and live in Europe or the US without having to apply for a visa or, you know, having to stay for a certain amount of time. So my son is in college and he's the youngest in Barcelona. When he left a year and a half ago, that's when I said, let me scout. So I went to New Orleans and I went to LA, May 2023 and July 2023, just to see where I wanted to spend the next winter. Because now that my life doesn't affect anybody else, my decisions don't affect directly to my kids, I felt free to, you know, take a chance, take a kind of a leap of faith. And I took a break. I went 10 days to New Orleans and then I went 10 days to LA, and New Orleans won like 100-0. Like it was so much easier getting into the community, finding the right spots. Music was happening everywhere all the time. Second time they see you, they call you by your name. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to spend winter 2024 in New Orleans. So I saved up some money. I raised a little money for the recording right before I left. And I went to New Orleans for 4 months in 2024 this year, between January and May, just to write music and maybe make an EP. You know, I was like, no big expectations. So I got there. I booked the recording studio without knowing who were going to be the musicians in the recording. I was like, let New Orleans tell you. And it was a big success. I didn't expect having a full-length album. I didn't expect having my dream musicians, because I did have, you know, like Amina Scott was always in my head. Amina Scott, she's a great musician, composer, beautiful soul and smile.
Yeah.
But I wasn't meeting her. And I was a month before the recording and I still haven't met her, you know. And one day I was playing with my friend Yusa, whom I met there in New Orleans too. She invited me to play at the Snap Harbor. And I played on piano and guitar because I had my guitar, my weird keyboard. And Amina was there and I didn't know. And then I crossed the street and at the Spotted Cat, they saw me with my guitar and said, Marina, come on in, sit in. And Amina was there on the street. When I take a break and I go back out, she's like, who are you? I love your music. What are you doing here? And I'm like, well, I'm trying to make a little recording. I'm making a self-made residency here. She's like, I want to be in your record. And I was like, I almost cried. I'm like, Amina, I can't believe this is happening at 2 a.m. on the street in New Orleans, that you're asking me to be my record. Because I didn't know how to approach you. I don't have money enough to hire you. It needs to be a personal connection. I'll pay you something, but I don't have $1,000 to offer you as you deserve. So anyhow, that's how it went. And again, the people that I was wishing to have, they're there, all of them. It's pretty magical.
That's incredible. That really is.
Yes,
That's incredible.
I know.
Tell me about playing Ellis Marsalis's piano, and what does that mean? What does that do? Or is it, I can't imagine it's just an object.
No, no. And what it is, it's also not only a place. There is this new project there. It's fairly new, and it's called the Ellis Marsalis Center. And it's a school, a music school, mostly for underprivileged kids. They gave them instruments, best teachers, and they have a nice sized concert hall where the piano lives, Ellis Marsalis' piano. When I was there, actually, when I recorded there, the week before, Brentford Marsalis just moved back to New Orleans to be the director of that center. So the week before I recorded, Brentford Marsalis recorded in the same hall. But they told me that nobody has recorded an album with Ellis Marsalis' piano yet. I was the first one because that album apparently had no piano. So it's an honor for many reasons. And also I love the project. The person who took me there, funny enough, it's a Seattleite. His name is Justin Armstrong. He's a top-notch sound engineer. And another common friend that now is in Pensacola drove all the way from Pensacola, Charlie Akeley, and said, Marina, I want you to meet Justin. And Justin was an amazing soul. He took me to several studios, recording studios, to see where I wanted to make the album. And when he took me to the Ellis Marsalis Center, where he is a teacher there for the kids. So behind the stage, there is a sound booth. They have the best mics. It's ready. So he teaches the kids also sound and production. And when I saw the hall and I saw a concert there, I said, that's what I want to do it. I want everybody on stage recording at the same time in the same space. And he's like, okay, let's ask them. We just need for them to approve it. But yeah, let's go. And so we did. And playing that piano, that by the way, it's in perfect shape. They have it like super well balanced. Sounds beautiful. They tuned it for me. It was very inspiring. It was easy. It's an instrument. It's like if somebody gives you, I don't know, a Porsche, you're driving your little Prius, and then they give you a really good car, really well tuned, and it's easy. It's enjoyable. Like you play a C major there and it sounds like heaven.
Wow.
And of course, it is meaningful to me having the honor of playing an instrument that has so much history for the piano and for New Orleans. I mean, that was a little bit of a big deal, but also it felt very easy. It felt beautiful. And the people there that were listening, people who were managing, they came to me at the end of the day and thanked me for playing such beautiful music in the maestro's piano. I was like, really? They were like, yeah, we see many people playing here, but you are playing really beautiful music. And let us know when you release the videos and the album. We really want to be part. We want to put them on our website. So they were really happy with me. They made me feel like home. I can't believe it. And I actually want to approach them to see if we can present the album there, because I think it would be the perfect spot for us to present the album in New Orleans. So
That's a great idea.
a gift from the universe, and I couldn't be more thankful.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Tell me about your daughter and her place on the record.
Yeah, my daughter, she is one of the best musicians I've ever met, although she's only 25. A little bit what I was telling you about myself, I saw it with my daughter She started singing when she was 9 months old. Before she could speak, she was singing straight up. I remember we were playing a gig. She's from September. So that was a Christmas gig that we had every year. 10 days. It's like a kids celebration that we did in Girona. And we had the stage for ourselves, for my family, my mom, my dad, my siblings, and I. And we had a mix between some children's song, but then we would do some jazz. We played several sets throughout the day, very flexible. Serena, my daughter, was playing around one of the games. There's areas for toddlers, areas for little more grown-ups. And she comes over and says, Mom, can I sing a song? Because she was, with 2 years old, she was speaking perfectly. The pronunciation was right. And I'm like, yeah, sure, come on over. Jumps on stage. She's 2 years and 3 months old. And she started singing one song. And then she said, let's do another one. Because that was our game in the car. She would never stop singing. So she started singing one and another one and another one, all the children's songs. And then everybody, and it's like a convention center. Everybody started gathering around the stage. Everybody would stop what they were doing and gather around the stage, like hundreds and hundreds of people. And I started crying. I couldn't believe it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we have another musician in the band now.
Wow.
And it's going to be very hard getting rid of this one. But she was like, no. A year later, around the 3 years old, she comes down to the recording studio. At that time, it was still a garage, but that's where we record with my ex. And that's actually where my son is working now at the recording studio in Barcelona. And she comes down and says, puts headphones on and says, Mom, I want to make a record. And I said, yeah, cool. She's like, no, I want to make a record. And I said, okay, she's serious. So I translated a bunch of children's stories from around the world. And then I composed a little song after each story in Spanish, original of mine, so that the little kids could understand quickly the key of the story. And she would learn all the songs, and then we would record all the songs. And that's her first record when she was 3 years old. And I even founded a record label to release that one. And we sold quite a lot. It's still on iTunes. You can find it. Amazing. And then it took me a few years releasing it. So in the meantime, she was doing all the drawing. So all the artwork was also made by her. So we're speaking, she's 3 years old, right? And you already see what's going on. She started asking me to go to castings, Disney Channel and musical theater. And I was like, if you want to be a musician and you want to be a performer, you'll have to go to school first. And she said, oh, perfect. That's what I want. I want more music. So I found this school in Barcelona. It's elementary, middle, and high school that has the music conservatory integrated in it. So the kids go from math, choir, solfege 4 times a week, private instruction twice a week. So Serena, when she was 12, she was transcribing all sort of pop and rock and classical and making the MuseScore, the software, and it sounded like the original version. Like she was playing Leo Brouwer on guitar, she was playing Bach, she was playing Paco de Lucia when she was 12. So we took it seriously. And then my other kid, my son, kind of got dragged into that school as well and played saxophone. And now he's a musician. He's much more of a producer and a sound engineer, but he's a beautiful musician. So anyhow, Serena was always there. And I always said, I don't want to force music to my kids. I do want them to speak music. But if they ask me to I want lessons or I want to play, then I'm going to take it very seriously. And that's what we did. And so she's been always a hard worker and also a very talented person. But I made a point for her to understand the hard work that you have to put into it. And right now, she's doing great in Spain. She's singing in big festivals, reggae and dub, and she has a beautiful jazz project with Xavier Lecouturier and Dylan Hayes and Martin Buri. They just recorded an album in Spain at my old studio with my son as an engineer. Wherever she goes and sings, she's instantly respected. So when I saw that I had a record really coming up, like, oh, I'm going to make a record here in New Orleans, I called her and said, Serena, I need you. There are at least 2 of the tunes that one of them you already put lyrics on, and I want you to sing a few more. So she only had 5 days available. She flew all the way from Spain for 5 days. And we not only made the record, but also premiered a new band that instantly got a residency that we're going to start in January in New Orleans. Instantly. Like the venue was like, we want you every week. And I said, well, I'm leaving next week. I've been here for 4 months. And Serena is also leaving. So we have a residency with Yusa, Serena, and myself. Wherever she goes and opens her mouth or takes the guitar and plays, like people get captivated right away. She's got that. So I'm very lucky just to now at her age, like we can share a stage and studio, and she gives me this moral support that I didn't have in New Orleans. She's family. She knows me. She knew I was stressed. She would come and calm me down. And then she would take the mic, and the first day was boom, right there, right? And everyone was like, oh, wait, and she can solo like an instrument. So she's a natural and a hard worker. So I couldn't be more proud. And yeah, I'm so happy that she's with me in this adventure and that she's big part of the album. It's my daughter. So makes me really, really happy.
That's incredible. Have you gotten to gig live with Amina and Pedro and Yusa, or is that coming up, or did you work it all when you were there?
Coming up. It's coming up. Amina and Pedro are so beautiful. They both have texted me and said, hey, when are you back in New Orleans? When are we presenting the album? So they're on board. I haven't had mental space to put that together yet, and I don't want to rush it, but that's happening. It is. And Yusa and I are like sisters. It is happening. It is. These beautiful humans gave me so much, so generously. I really run out of words of gratitude and admiration for them. So yes, I'll let you know. This is happening.
Wonderful. Well, listen, I asked you the question about classical composers. I'm curious. I think I know the answer, but I want to ask you a similar question about jazz composers.
What do you think?
I think Chick Corea.
See, that's a funny one. Chick Corea, I always liked him a lot as a composer. There is also something in his piano that is always very high, the EQ. Somebody told me that it's because he was losing probably some audition, some hearing. And so his pianos were very bright. So for some reason, it was a little hard for me listening too much to him in a row. I've been always more of a Harry Hancock, from that generation, Keith Jarrett. Chick Corea, again, I love his composition. I enjoyed the children's songs on Vibes and his duets with Gary Burton. That's like top for me. But yeah, for sure, Chick Corea. And people keep comparing me to him, I think because he had this love story with Spanish music and Latin music, and I feel very much the same way. But yeah, Bill Evans, I've transcribed a lot of Bill Evans. If you're a piano player, But I also love going a little back and Tommy Flanagan, Greg Garland, Kenny Kirkland, of course, McCoy Tyner. And this is mostly as players. If we talk about composers, like jazz composers, Chick Corea for sure, Harry Hancock, yes. Benny Golson, of course, Duke Ellington and Billy Strayhorn. These 4 or 5 are like not only great players, but super special and delicate composers to me, opening new ground.
I really appreciate your embrace of the electric instruments and the way you integrate them in a very natural way to bring in the tones and bring in the other colors in the palette without them dominating. They have their role. And I don't know, I think it's a very difficult thing to pull off. And I enjoy that about your music.
Yeah, on that record, the only track that it's not recorded at the Ellis Marsalis Center is the brass band. And it's because the acoustics are so much of a concert hall that the brass band would have been hard to mix and take the sound. So we went to a much drier room at Marina Studios. And the piano there wasn't that good, and I didn't want to record on the beautiful piano and then have a song that had. And I thought, no, wait a second. They have a beautiful Wurlitzer. My friend Charlie, the one that came from Pensacola, he used to work at the Rhodes factory when he was 16. So he's the one fixing my Wurlis. And he came all the way from Pensacola, put the Wurli in perfect shape. And then in New Orleans, I was known from playing guitar. So I'm like, and I played with a New Breed brass band twice, playing guitar, and they loved it. They were like, you're taking the brass band to a new level. I'm like, perfect. So I decided to do the brass band tune with Wurli and guitar. Because at the end of the day, the brass band doesn't really have piano either. So that was the perfect segue for me to include these 2 instruments. The Wurlitzer, it's like a smaller Rhodes electric piano, not digital, electric, like a little xylophone inside. And I'm known in Seattle because I don't want to play fake digital pianos. I don't even own one. And when there is a concert and they don't have piano, I bring my Wurlitzer. And so I've been known for many years for being a weirdo and not playing digital pianos. And I've been playing the Wurlitzer even with big band, and they love it. So I was like, perfect. I need to include the Wurli and, of course, the guitar, that it's been my kind of New Orleans staple for Marina. And I think, to me, I think it worked pretty nicely because it's like me with these keyboards and the brass band. I think to me, it works best or better than with the piano. So yeah, I'm very, very happy that I include these two. They mean a lot in my life.
Yeah. Have you seen the young man that plays piano now he's in the Prez Hall Jazz Band and he's also in the Headhunters now?
Yes. What's his name? Yes, I know who I
forget his name. I'm sorry to bring it up without remembering his name, but he's incredible.
Yes.
Incredible.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
Really something.
Yes, that New Orleans, every 2 or 3 musicians you talk to, there is a Grammy nomination. It's wild. The musicianship level from the youngest people to the all from traditional to rock to soul. It's amazing. It doesn't cease to amaze me. And I don't know everybody yet. I haven't been to all the venues, but the ratio of Grammys and Grammy nominations, it's crazy down there. They are so good.
Yeah. Well, make sure you buy a round trip ticket when you go because we want you back here in Seattle. So
actually, my flight is round trip. I bought it from Seattle and I'm coming back May 8th because I'm playing with the Federal Way Big Band, my music on May 10th. And I'm already scheduling all my concerts, Narcissic Bistro with the Island, Jazz at the Gallery, the Fellowship. It's all going to be happening in May and June. I'm going to be here for 2 months for sure.
Thank you so much, Marina Albero. As always, thank you for listening to Spotlight On. Spotlight On is executive produced and hosted by me, Lawrence Purrier. We're produced and marketed by Michael Donaldson. Editing and sound design is by Terry Grant. Our theme music is by Q-Burn's Abstract Message. The most important member of our team is you. Thanks for supporting our work. Please rate and review us wherever you listen to podcasts, and then visit us online at spotlightonpodcast.com. There you'll find our free episode archive, our online store, and a link to make a donation to support our work. Thanks for listening, be safe, and stay in touch.